Most people think the person who pulls away is the one who didn't care. They read the silence as a verdict, as a final answer, as the door being closed from the other side. And for a long time, that was the dominant story we told about men who go quiet. The man who disappears wasn't invested. The man who retreats wasn't loving. The man who suddenly can't look you in the eye at dinner wasn't holding anything in his chest he didn't have words for. We flattened all of it into indifference because indifference has a clean shape. You can point at it, name it, and move on from a clean answer. But here's what most people miss. I'm going to walk through this with you slowly because the surface reading of an avoidance behavior is almost always wrong. The retreat is not the evidence that you didn't matter. The retreat, in many cases, is the evidence that you did. The avoidant doesn't pull away because he has nothing to protect. He pulls away because he has something to protect and doesn't trust his own hands with it. Let me say that again. He doesn't pull away because the relationship was nothing. He pulls away because the relationship became something. And for a man whose entire emotional education taught him that closeness is the danger zone, something becoming something is exactly the moment when he defaults to the only move he has. That move isn't fight. It isn't flight in the dramatic sense. It is freeze. It is the slow, almost apologetic withdrawal that doesn't even leave a clear fingerprint on the relationship. He's still texting, but later. He is still showing up, but flatter. He is in the room with you, but somehow not fully in it. So if you're sitting at the end of a long day, replaying some version of this, him being cooler, him being quieter, him being less available in a way that didn't quite have a name, and you're trying to decide whether it means he doesn't care or whether it means he cares too much, I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes. Picture this. It's 11 at night and your phone is face down on the nightstand. You are not waiting for him to text. You have already told yourself you are not waiting, but you are. You are sitting with a specific moment, some Tuesday. A Tuesday when he was quieter than usual at dinner, when he answered your questions without looking up, when he said, "I'm fine," and you knew he wasn't fine, and you also knew you weren't going to push. Because somewhere along the way you learned that pushing on his quiet makes the quiet worse. So you let it sit. You let him have it. And then you started replaying every other moment you'd ever let him have it. And you started wondering, quietly in the back of your chest, whether you had, all along, been giving him the exact room he needed to leave. That is the question I want to walk you through. Not whether he's pulling away. He's already pulling away. The question is what the pulling away means. And the deeper question, the one underneath it, is whether the thing he was protecting when he pulled away was you. Here's the truth about avoidance that almost no one says out loud. Most avoidants are not cold people. Most avoidants are terrified people. They were not built cold. They were built careful. If you ask the right questions, and you don't even need to ask many, almost every avoidant will tell you some version of a story about an early environment where needing was unsafe, where attachment was punished or ignored, where the people a child relied on were inconsistent in ways that taught the child to self-supply. Self-sufficiency wasn't the value they chose. It was the survival mechanism they learned before they had language, and they carry it still. This matters because it means the behavior you're reading as callousness is almost never callousness. It is the older reflex moving through a newer adult nervous system. He pulls away not because he wants to hurt you. He pulls away because his system has only one response when intimacy deepens, and that response has been rehearsed for 30 years. It is the only fluent sentence he knows how to say in that moment. And here's the part I want to be careful with. None of this is license. None of this is me telling you to translate his withdrawal into love and call it enough. I am not romanticizing avoidance, and I am not asking you to lower your standard for how you're treated. I am showing you the architecture of what you're dealing with, because you cannot make a clean decision from a wrong diagnosis. If you decide he is cold, you will act accordingly. If you decide he is afraid, you might act differently And you deserve to act from the truest version of the situation, not the version that flatters your worst fears. So let me give you the truest version. The truest version is this. A man who pulls away as intimacy deepens is a man whose nervous system is sending him a message his conscious mind has not approved. There is a part of him that registers you as significant. In fact, there is a part of him that registers you as the first significant thing in a long time. And that registration is exactly what triggers the exit strategy. Because the avoidance mind runs a peculiar equation in the background. Closeness creates dependency. Dependency creates vulnerability. Vulnerability creates the possibility of pain. And so the avoidant, 20 years old or 45, will attempt to leave the relationship before the relationship can leave him. I'm going to say that sentence again because it's the heart of the entire video. He will attempt to leave the relationship before the relationship can leave him. That is the line that most clearly explains what you've been experiencing. And here's the part that's going to surprise you. He didn't expect you to be okay with the withdrawal. He expected you to fight for him instead. That is the choreography he's been building in his head without realizing he was building it. He pulls back, you lean in, and the dance continues. He leaves, you chase, and he can keep the relationship at the exact arm's length his nervous system can tolerate. That is the script he's lived inside before. And when you don't play the script, when you don't chase, something happens inside him that he is entirely unprepared for. You don't chase him. That's the move that breaks the script. That's the move that surprises him in a way nothing else has. Because let me be honest with you about what he expected. When he pulled away, he had a story ready for what would happen next. He had decided how it was going to go. He would pull back, he would feel a brief flicker of relief, and then either you would chase and he could stay at his distance, or you would collapse and the relationship would end, and he could keep his sad, clean story about how it wasn't going to work anyway. Both endings still had him in the role of the man who walked away. Both endings spared him from finding out what it would mean to be the man who stayed. He didn't expect you to go quiet. He expected you to chase him instead. He expected you to text again that very night. He expected you to ask him what was wrong 3 times until he could hand you some smaller truth. He expected you to show up at his door uninvited, or to send the kind of message that makes it easy for him to keep being the cool one, the removed one, the one not leaning in. He had built the whole next 4 weeks around you doing exactly that. And when you didn't, when you went on with your own life, and when you sat at dinner with your friends and talked about other things, when you returned to the gym and called your sister and never once turned the camera in his direction, something inside his well-built story collapsed, quietly, without you doing a single dramatic thing. That's when the locked room starts to be heard from the inside. Let me explain what I mean by that. He retreated because he needed a room. He built, without knowing he was building it, an interior space where he sat with whatever you had begun to be to him, and he closed the door. The door was quiet. It didn't slam. It closed like a normal door closing, and on your side of it, the room just stopped letting you in. Inside that room, the avoidant felt the relief he had been chasing. He felt his feet on the ground again. He felt his own life come back to him. He felt for about 4 days like the man he was before you made him more than that. So far, so good. But then something happens. On the outside of the door, you have stopped knocking. You haven't made the door the center of your day. You have not made your silence about him. You have made your silence about yourself. About sleeping, about working, about being with your friends in a way you hadn't been fully present for in months. Because part of you was always listening for him. You got louder on your side of the door, not in volume, in presence. And on his side of the door, the absence of your knocking starts to do something unexpected. It starts to do the one thing an avoidant cannot prepare for. It starts to make the room quieter than he wanted it to be. He thought he wanted silence. He thought he wanted the room to himself. And now he has it. And now, inside that silence, he hears the version of you who isn't chasing him. He hears the version of you that's busy. He hears the version of you who apparently doesn't need the door to be answered. This is the moment where the locked room becomes a vacuum. He didn't expect you to give him what he asked for. He expected you to refuse it instead. Because his asking for the room was, in his unconscious choreography, the only way he knew how to test whether you would let him have it. And deep in his ribs, he was hoping you would not let him have it. He was hoping you would push through the door. He was hoping the retreat would be a problem for you, so the problem could stay out there and he could stay in here. But you let him have it. You let him have the room, and he is alone with it now. He sits in that room. For the first few days, the quiet feels like the answer. It feels like a long bath after a long week. It feels like his own bed. And then, and this is the part that begins the undoing, the quiet develops something in it. An echo, not a sound. The echo is the absence of your voice in places where there used to be your voice. The echo is him reaching for his phone at the right time of day and finding that the timing he used to keep for your messages has stopped being kept. The echo is him picking up a piece of news he would have sent to you and noticing in his hands that there is no one in his life he is still allowed to send it to. Not because you blocked him, not because he cannot reach you, but because he built the room that excluded you and he is the only one standing in it. This is where the room's character changes. The room stops being the safe, quiet container he built it to be. It begins to become the container of his own absence from your life. And when he steps back from the locked door and looks around, really looks, not the kind of looking where he has already rehearsed the answer. What he sees is a room with a single bed, his own laptop on the table, his own shoes by the door, and no space for the second pair of shoes that until recently was beginning to feel native to the floor. He starts to wonder why he is not being chased. And here's the thing, the wondering is what begins to undo him. He does not have a script for this. He has a script for you chasing. He has a script for the slow, sad breakup where he is the man who walked away and that walk becomes a story he can carry to his friends. He has a script for the version where, in 3 months, he tells someone that it didn't work out. And that person nods and they move on, and he never has to say out loud that the reason it didn't work out was that he got scared of how much he wanted it. He doesn't have a script for you being fine. He didn't expect you to be fine. He expected you to be unmoored instead. He expected you to need him in the specific, voiced, complicated, half-angry way that would let him stay in the role of the man who was leaving a woman who wanted him back. That's the role he knows. It is the role he can wear without tearing. It lets him leave without feeling that he abandoned someone. It lets him frame the whole thing as incompatibility, or bad timing, or a slow drift that no one really wanted. But you being fine doesn't fit any of those frames. You being fine cuts the strings he was planning to use to lift the story out of his chest. Now his own silence stops being a relief and begins to become a gravitational pull. He is sitting in his room and the room is still quiet and his phone is still in his hand, but the hand has become heavy in a way he cannot quite name. The weight of the phone is the weight of a tool he has not used, the weight of a name he could type, the weight of one text he could send, and he doesn't send it. Not because he is being cruel, not because he is committed to staying away, but because he does not yet trust himself to write the first sentence of a conversation that, once started, he would no longer be able to pace. And so the room becomes something else. It becomes a room with one chair in it that no longer fits where he put it. It becomes a room where his own reflection in the window has started to look like a man who lost something he invented the losing of. I'm going to stay with this image for another minute because it will help you. There is a particular kind of room that exists inside an avoidant. I want you to understand its furniture. There is a chair in the room and the chair faces the door. He sits in the chair when he is on the docket with himself, when he is conducting the small court case where he decides whether he will text you. There is a window in the room, and the window was supposed to be the room's ventilation. the place where the relationship got to leave when it started to feel too heavy. But the window lately has started to look like a mirror, and the mirror lately has started to look like the only witness in the room. There is a table in the room. The table has a single plate on it. He told himself the single plate was freedom. The single plate has begun to look like a permanent thing, and there is a phone on the table. The phone is the heaviest object in the room, and the phone is the only object that, if picked up, would change the dimensions of the space. Now I want to walk you through what the room sounds like when your quiet starts to settle into it. It starts to sound like a question. He cannot hear the question in his conscious mind. He only hears the absence of the answer he had been waiting for. He had been waiting for, without knowing he was waiting, for your protest, your knock, your voice on the other side of the door. And the moment that voice is not there, the room has to do something with the silence. So it does what rooms do with silence. It amplifies it. A small absence becomes a large one. A large one becomes a reckoning. And the reckoning is the part of the dynamic you cannot fake, manufacture, or accelerate. The reckoning is the part that has to happen on his side of the door. I want to tell you something I have not heard anyone say about this dynamic, and then I want to walk you through it. The avoidant does not fall back in love with you because you became unavailable. He falls back in love with you because your unavailability was the first accurate mirror he has ever stood in front of. He has spent his life being available to himself in the absence of anyone else. Your quiet was the first honest signal that the absence of you was not a thing his own self-sufficiency could carry. And that signal, slowly and without your help, and sometimes against his will, did what his own thoughts could not do. It told him the truth he'd been telling himself he didn't need to hear. And here's something I want you to understand about that signal. You did not send it on purpose. You sent it by going on with your own life, by sleeping your own hours, by not making his silence the subject of your day. The signal you sent is not a strategy. It is the natural byproduct of a woman who has standards and a flaw under her. And it works on the avoidant precisely because it is not performed. The avoidant's nervous system is constantly scanning for inauthenticity. He lives with his own performance every day. He sees through performed availability in a minute. What he does not see through is genuine availability that has its own schedule. Now, and this is where you come in, the most important thing you can do in this entire dynamic is not to dramatize the room he's in. The most important thing is to keep building your own room on the other side of the door, because whatever you build over there becomes the alternative gravitational field he begins to feel through the wall. The alternative gravitational field is the only thing more powerful than the locked room. The locked room is fear. The room on your side is substance, and substance beats fear every single time, but only if it is real. What I mean by that, and I want to be very precise, is that you cannot build a fake room. You cannot construct a tidy image of yourself having the time of your life in the hope that it pulls him back. Manipulation theater does not work on the avoidance nervous system. He is a high-frequency detector of people performing. He lives with his own performance every day. He will see yours in a minute, so build a real room. Build the one you were always supposed to be building. Eat the meals you have been postponing. Pick up the hobbies you set down when the relationship started asking for more attention than they did. Sleep at the hours you stopped sleeping at. Reconcile with the friend you let drift when he became the center of your world. Move your body, because moving your body is the most reliable way to remind your nervous system that it has a nervous system. Do not package it as a project designed to draw him back. Package it as you returning to yourself. This is the part of the dynamic the avoidant cannot prepare for. He pulled away to feel like himself. He built his quiet room to feel like himself. And what he finds the other side of the door is that you have begun the same project. Two people on either side of a door, one of them closed, both rebuilding themselves in the silence. Except you are rebuilding yourself of something he does not have. You are rebuilding yourself with the willingness to be with yourself. He is rebuilding himself with the need to be away from you. And one of those rebuilds has a floor you can stand on. The other is a room with a locked door. Now I want to slow down because we are approaching the part that determines what happens next. He will, somewhere in this period, and I will tell you that the timing usually lives somewhere between weeks 3 and 6. Pick up the phone. Not because his friends told him to. Not because the version of masculinity he saw on the internet told him to. Because the echo of your absence has gotten so loud that the room he built to be quiet is no longer quiet. It has become a room with one voice in it, his, repeating, not the words he would send you, the questions he would have to ask if he asked you anything. What are you doing tonight? Are you still at the same place? Did you keep going to the gym? Are you with that friend who always made you laugh at the wrong moment? The questions are not intimate. They are reconnaissance. They are a man checking the floorboards of a building he walked out of to see if anyone has moved the furniture. And here is what's interesting. When he sends those messages, and many of them will sound like nothing, the way you respond becomes the loudest signal in the entire dynamic. Not what you say, how quickly you say it. Whether you make him the center of the day again, whether you treat his reappearance as the answer to a question you've been quietly asking for the past few weeks. Because if you do, you give him the script back. You let him re-enter the relationship through the door he took away from you. You give him his old room back. And he will, with great relief, sit down in the chair again. And then he will, within a few weeks, feel the same thing he felt before. And he will, within a few months, pull the door shut again. And you will be right where you are today, but with fewer months behind you than you have now. So I want to walk through what your response is supposed to be. Carefully, because this is the part that gets misunderstood. If he texts, you respond. You are not cold. You are not punishing. You do not ignore him. You respond like someone who has things in her life that are not him, whose response to him was always going to arrive, who is genuinely glad to hear from him, but who has dinner to cook, and a friend waiting, and a finish line at the gym she hasn't hit yet this week. Let me pause on that for a moment, because it's the second simplest idea in the entire video, and it's the one most worth carrying. You are genuinely glad to hear from him. You are not playing a role. You are not performing. You are simply glad in the way a person who is full of her own day is glad. The gladness comes from a real place. The unavailability comes from a real place. And he can tell. He will always be able to tell. Now, and this is where the room starts to crack. The moment he registers that you are genuinely busy and genuinely glad and genuinely not the woman he left 3 weeks ago, he has to make a new decision. He has to decide whether he wants to remain a guest in your life or whether he wants to come inside. And the avoidance nervous system will tell him, again, in the same language it has always spoken, to stay a guest, but there will be a competing signal coming from somewhere deeper, from the part of him that doesn't actually want to be a guest, that wanted and still wants to be the man who sits on the other side of your dinner table by right. And that deeper signal is what the room on his side is now built to suppress. And that is what your quiet, your real quiet, your floor under it quiet has begun to surface. And please hear me on this next part, because the implications of this are large. The fact that your quiet is doing this work does not mean your quiet is doing his work. He has to do his own work. He has to open the door. He has to walk into the mirror his room has become and recognize the man standing in it. He has to put down the phone and then pick it up again and then send something honest. That is not your job. Your job is to be the woman whose quiet was accurate. Your job is to be the woman with the flaw. The man's reckoning is his. The man's return is his. And if he does not return, your flaw still has to hold. And now I want to come around to the part of this dynamic that I think is being left out of the conversation. The part that nobody wants to name. The avoidant who pulls away is not always the avoidant who comes back. Some of them walk out of the room and never return to it. Some of them, even after the reckoning, even after the mirror does its work, choose the version of themselves that is safe over the version of themselves that is whole. Some of them will never learn the difference between safe and whole. And you, having done your work, having built the room on your side, having held the boundary, having kept the standard, will be the one standing in the truth while he stays in the room. That is a real possibility. And I think we have to be honest about it, because honest is the only way I'll speak to you. And here is something I want you to understand about that scenario, because it is the scenarios no one wants to talk about. The man who walks back is not the only version of the man who loves you. Some of the men who love you will, in fact, walk away and stay walked. Some of them will, even after the long silence you honored, even after you held the boundary, choose to remain the man who needed the room more than he needed you. And that will hurt. And it will be the right hurt, even though it doesn't feel that way in the middle of it. But it is not the worst thing that can happen. Let me say that again. The worst thing that can happen is not that he doesn't come back. The worst thing that can happen is that you let your silence become about him. The worst thing that can happen is that you build the room on your side of the door so he can see it. The worst thing that can happen is that you stop being the woman who can stand in your own truth. The worst thing that can happen is that you arrive 6 months from now more oriented around his return than around your own return. That is the failure, not his. I want to pause on this for a moment because it deserves a quieter beat than I've been giving it. He may come back. He may not. Both are real possibilities, and you have to be willing to hold the standard in the middle of either of them, because the standard is what keeps you from rebuilding yourself around the prediction of what he will or will not do. The standard is the structure you stand inside of. The standard is not a punishment you impose on him. The standard is the architectural drawing of the woman you are becoming. And the woman you are becoming is not a woman waiting by a door. She is a woman who lives on a floor. I want to say what I think the standard actually looks like, because most people use the word standard to mean the criteria the man failed. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the conditions under which you are willing to be in a relationship at all. They are the bare minimum of being treated as someone whose interior matters. They are the conditions where a man knows your name, knows your rhythms, knows what's hard for you this week, knows what your week is even made of. They are the conditions where a man does not use silence as a verb. They are the conditions where a man, when he pulls away, comes back and names what happened and does not let the woman do the work of interpreting his absence. That is the standard. And if he returns into a relationship where that standard is in place, not because it is a punishment, because it is the structure. Without it, the next round of his retreat will sound exactly like the last round. The pattern will repeat. The choreography will repeat. The man will repeat. Now let me hand you a few simpler principles for the weeks ahead in plain prose. There is no list coming, no numbered breakdown. There are a few things I want you to live by while the room you're building settles into its floor. You rebuild your own week. I mean this practically. You rebuild the structure of the meals, the friendships, the small rituals of rest and movement that the relationship slowly displaced. You do this not to send him a signal, but to give your nervous system the regulation it has been missing. The rebuilt week is what gives you the gravity the avoidant feels through the wall. You hold the boundary he drew. You do not chase him. You do not send the message that is half apology and half explanation and half warmth. You do not send the message at all. You do not pass along breadcrumbs through mutual friends. You do not post the song that is half subtle and half coded. You let the boundary he drew remain the boundary he drew until he redraws it himself, with you standing on the other side. You stop rehearsing the speech. You don't draft the perfect paragraph that is going to make him see what he did. You don't save the article on attachment styles to send him later. The avoidant does not change because you explained it beautifully. He changes because the correct conditions exist. Your job is to be one of those conditions. The other conditions, his own reflection, his own friends, his own quiet, you don't control. So stop rehearsing the speech and start having the dinner. You stay honest about whether anything has actually changed if he returns. The avoidant who has done his reckoning is different in observable ways. He is slower. He is more direct. He is more able to name what he's feeling. He is more able to stay inside a sentence without turning it into a deflection. The avoidant who has not reckoned is simply trying to return to the comfortable role he had before he pulled away. There is a meaningful difference between those two men. You will feel the difference in your chest. You will feel it in the way he answers one question versus the way he deflects another. Trust that signal, even when his voice is warm again. You remember who you were before him. And by that, I do not mean you regress. I mean you remember the woman whose week had nothing missing in it, whose floor was her own, whose door was her own, whose quiet was her own. That woman is in you. She is not behind you. She is waiting. And now let me come back to where we started, because I think I owe you one more pass through the original question. Most people think the person who pulls away is the one who didn't care. That is the surface reading. It is the reading that lets you move on quickly. It is the reading that lets you frame the man as wrong without having to consider whether anything about you was wrong. And I want to be honest with you about this. Sometimes that reading is correct. Some men who pull away were always going to pull away. Some of them are not afraid of intimacy. Some of them are simply done. And in those cases, you cannot manufacture a story about an avoidant nervous system because the man in question was not running one. You have to call it what it is and grieve it. But some of the men who pull away are doing the precise opposite of not caring. They are caring in the way their nervous system has taught them to care, which is, unfortunately, painfully, embarrassingly, by leaving, by withdrawing, by making a room they thought was empty enough to feel safe in. They are wrong about the room. They don't know that yet. And you, by going quiet in your own right, by not chasing, by rebuilding yourself in a way that was never about him, give them the only accurate mirror they're going to stand in front of this decade. If the mirror does its work, the relationship you two come back to is not the same one he withdrew from. It is a different relationship. It is one where he has seen himself walking away. It is one where he knows, behind the new warmth, there is the memory of the man who locked his own heart. It is one where you know, behind the rebuilt room, there is the woman who held herself together long enough to let him choose. That is not a perfect relationship, but it is a real one. And for two, I'll take real. If the mirror doesn't do its work, you still keep what you have built. You keep the floor. You keep the quiet of your own gravity. You keep the standard, which is no longer a thing you are imposing on him, but a thing you are living inside of. You keep the version of yourself who held the boundary without needing it to be reciprocated. You keep the woman who learned that she was larger than the situation. And that woman, in time, will go on to build a different room with someone else or with no one else. And that room will be a place where her shoes are not contested, where her door closes when she wants it to, where the silence in it sounds like hers. Let me give you the sentence I want you to take with you when this video is over. He's not pulling away because you failed. He's pulling away because you mattered. And the room he builds to keep safe from how much you mattered is the room that's going to bring him back. And if the room doesn't bring him back, the woman who understood all of that and stayed oriented around her own life is the woman who is going to walk through the rest of her own life with a floor under her feet and the quiet that is hers. That's the closer. That's the verdict. Take it with you.